A majestic view of Earth from China's new space station. Just one of many highlights from 2021 as we take a look back at an extraordinary year in space. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. From Mars to space tourism, it's been an extraordinary year of interstellar travel. China ramped up its missions with a new record, more than 40 launches, including a space station. And since its touchdown in May, China's Mars rover is providing new insights into the red planet. But China is not alone, as new missions from the United States and other countries also took flight. John Zarrella has more in this report.
Mid-February, NASA's Mars Perseverance rover lands.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars.
First images back from the red planet are spectacular. In April, a tiny helicopter called Ingenuity then became the first powered, controlled flight on another world.
Altimeter data confirms that Ingenuity has performed its first flight of a powered aircraft on another planet.
Everything was nominal. It all worked. When it comes to space exploration, that's what you want to hear. And in 2021, nominal was the norm. China sent a combo orbiter, lander, and rover to Mars. No nation had ever done that. In May, with the successful touchdown of its rover on Mars, China became the third country, along with the United States and Russia, to ever stick the landing. The United Arab Emirates went to Mars too, putting the Arab world's first deep space probe in orbit around the red planet. Besides Mars, China achieved another milestone, launching the core module of its first long-term space station. The first half of 2021 was marked by a string of successful missions. Besides Mars and a new space station, NASA and SpaceX continued to fly astronauts to the International Space Station under the Commercial Crew program. And in mid-June, China's first crew arrived at its new home.
Fire, fire.
Then in July, commercial companies ushered in the age of space tourism, perhaps changing the landscape forever.
I'm an adult in a spaceship with lots of other wonderful adults looking down to our beautiful, beautiful Earth.
Virgin Galactic's Unity and a week later Blue Origin's New Shepard both flew with passengers to the edge of space.
Oh my gosh.
In September, for the first time in history, everyday people in a SpaceX Dragon capsule orbited the Earth without a professional astronaut on board.
Excited to show you about the research that we've been doing, as well as how much fun it is to be in microgravity.
And in October, William Shatner, the man who commanded the fictional Starship Enterprise,
weightlessness. Oh, Jesus.
Carmen line.
finally made it to space for real in the New Shepard. The historic year was capped off in November. Wang, part of the second crew of the new space station, became China's first woman to walk in space.
That was John Zarrella reporting there. He's standing by to join us live in just a moment. Also with us, we have Wang. He's the founder, CEO, and principal analyst at Constellation Research. Keith Cowing is the editor of spaceref.com, and Yansong is the Director General of the Asia Pacific Space Cooperation Organization, which is in Beijing. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Yansong, let me start with you. China has invested very heavily in space exploration this past year. As I said, we saw more than 40 launches take place this past year. In fact, I think the number was up to 50, and that included a new space station and 2 crewed missions. So what do you make of it? Can you take us through what China achieved over this past year?
Well, I think it's not only concentrated on the past year. Let's say we take it back to 2020, and also we had 39 launches. That does not include the launch from the lunar surface, which is the separate return mission of the Chang'e 5. So China is mostly concentrated as you have witnessed, as John introduced, that a number of activities have taken place, including the exploration missions, not only focusing to Mars, but also the lunar surface. We have also future lunar missions that is going to be covering the lunar polar regions to in search of the in situ resource and lunar volatiles, as we call it, for long sustained lunar surface space, either robotic missions or in the future human missions. And also the construction of the Chinese space station was very successful as the core module was launched successfully. And the second crew is already on board with the extension of 6 months. A number of experiments are taking place. We're also seeing a number of private sectors that has successfully placing satellites into orbit. Not only this month, we have a commercial company that have launched a single launcher with 5 satellites on board. So lots of activities in the government level as well as the private sector.
Right, Yansong, one of the missions that really caught public attention was the mission by Zhurong, which was the Mars rover, which explored the red planet's northern hemisphere. What did that tell us?
Well, the Zhurong, as well as the lander itself, has been very successful. It was launched by end of last year, and also we marched together with UAE and US at the same time. So as we used that opportunity to launch to Mars surface at the best opportunity, which was occurred in this year. So we have orbited the Mars with enough timing so that we can have reconnaissance and surface images that is ready for the landing process. And the landing also was simulated many times in ground. In Beijing, there's a facility for landing and descending. So this has been demonstrated to all international communities, including diplomats in Beijing. So the landing was well validated before we started the mission. So the first mission to Mars, as well as the first mission to the far side of the moon, which was conducted by Chang'e 5, and the successful sample return mission from lunar surface last year was also successful. So these are the fundamental parts of the Chinese exploration missions. So in the future, we're focusing on Mars sample returns as well as lunar science-based construction.
Ray Wang, here in the United States, we've seen a new era, the beginning of a new era of in-space travel, short flights for ordinary citizens, everyday people, as John called them. That's, of course, if you can afford it. They're not cheap. They're very expensive. I want to talk about that in a moment. But first, let me get your view very quickly on the Chinese program so far.
Yeah, I think the Chinese program's really been successful. They've been able to show that they can consistently deliver satellites and rockets and the automated technologies that are going to be required. I think we're going to see a battle for who's going to get to space dominance, not just on global communication satellites, mining, as well as control of space. We're seeing that. And of course, exploration. There's a lot of research and discovery on that end. We're also going to see, what's going to happen first in terms of colonization of the moon, using the moon as a base to get to Mars. And I think there's going to be a lot of exciting developments between the U.S., China, and ESA as everybody tries to get into that area. But I think the most interesting thing really is that you're seeing, the advancements occur very, very quickly on the Chinese side, and the ability to set international standards, set reusable technologies, and of course apply AI, robotics, and of course the technology that's required from materials sciences all the way down to software development, and also the hardware components that are required to get into space are going to have commercial implications for decades to come.
All right, Ray, let's talk about space tourism. And I mean, something that we did see in the past year. South Africa's Elon Musk, Britain's Richard Branson, America's Jeff Bezos and William Shatner, all into space, or I should say up to the edge of space. Are we going to see a lot more of that?
We definitely will. We're going to see much more on the space tourism side, but I think we're also going to see much more in terms of the satellite launch side, especially as you see what's happening with Starlink on Elon Musk with the SpaceX side, trying to get communication satellites and communications to remote areas around the world. But I think the most important thing is the fact that, we're going to drive down the cost of space tourism with each launch. The number of launches that are planned, and then of course what we have is, you can still have Boeing CST-100 Starliner that's coming up, and then of course whatever happens happens in terms of other public-private partnerships to get more space vehicles launched into the market. But what I'm most excited about is the fact that the frequency of launches are only going to increase starting in 2022. We're going to see a lot more opportunities for people to get up on Blue Origin or to get up on SpaceX and also, on Virgin Galactic. And it's so nice to see the privatization aspect occur as we see public-private partnerships, as we see the privatization take place. So I think a lot of the criticism about billionaires going into space, I think there's going to be a lot of implications in terms of advancements that people are going to see from that. And this is definitely an exciting opportunity. And I feel like we're in a 40-year cycle, right? We were talking about this in the 1960s and the 1970s, and hopefully this time this is for good.
Keith Cowing, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us. Looking at some of the other space programs, John Zarrella mentioned in his report the United Arab Emirates, which is seeking international partners for its space program. India is seeking to privatize its program. How do you see this part of the space race shape up?
Well, space race is a phrase that was used when I was a kid in the 60s, and it was us versus the Soviet Union. And usually with a race, you have to, both people in the race have to agree that you're in a race. Well, now we don't just have two countries competing with each other. We have multiple companies. We also have the private sector. So just to put that in place, if there's a race, people are running in the same direction and different directions at the same time. So that was then, this is now. But what does this mean for other countries than the traditional company? It means that space is for everybody, and we're going to see even more companies get involved, more countries get involved, and the mix between them will produce something that, as was mentioned before, we've talked about this for a long time. The future is here now, and we're probably going to see all the stuff that we've imagined that could happen.
John Zarrella, you've been covering space for a long time. What do you make of the uptick in space missions by China and other countries like the United Arab Emirates, like India, and that, of course, is in addition to the traditional players like the United States and Russia?
No, I think just as Keith pointed out, it's space is now for everyone, whether you're a nation state, whether you're an individual company, or look at between SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, as everybody's been saying, they're going to continue to expand. They're going to continue to fly more and more private citizens, more and more people, and it won't be just to the edge of space. It'll be like SpaceX did when they flew those 4 people for 3 days, around the Earth. You're going to see more and more of that as well. So it's only going to intensify, and there will be more and more nation states as well that will ramp up themselves. They'll get into consortiums with other people to make it more appealing, to make it more cost effective. But I think what's been proven, at least barring any terrible accidents down the road, is that companies can get individuals to space. You're going to see not only just space tourism, we'll see hotels in space probably within the next decade. We'll see new space stations going up, probably by private companies down the road. So, I hate to use the phrase, the sky's the limit, but there's no question about, that's where we're going. And, 2022 promises to be extremely exciting.
And John, in terms of technology, are each of these programs pursuing their own technological path, or is technology being shared?
No, not really. Everybody has their own prioritization on their technology. SpaceX isn't sharing with Blue Origin, and the U.S. certainly isn't sharing with China. And that's certainly not happening. So no, to a large degree, there's scientific exchange. There's no doubt about that. But as far as the technology itself, these companies play it pretty close to the vest as to what they do and how they do it. There's certain basics in space flight that everybody understands. But then when you get down beyond that, I'm sure, as Ray can point out, when you start talking about the software and things like that are developed by these individual companies and nation states, that's held pretty close to the vest.
Okay, Ray, a quick word from you on that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got a different type of software being used for landing technology. People are using different types of approaches in terms of how they back up, how they're capturing data. I think that's really important. And in each mission, right, they're trying to get the precision level to a higher level. They're trying to improve fuel efficiency. They're trying to improve accuracy in terms of targeting. All this is happening at the same time. And then, of course, they're also trying to figure out who's got a better lifespan on reusable rockets, for example. How do you do that? How do you get back to the moon with smaller payloads? And what do you have to do around that? And I think we also have some issues really around navigation in the future with what's going on with satellites, the number of satellites that are up there and the density that's going to be required. But they're using that software with every launch, and they're improving their models and their modeling capabilities so they can get to more efficient payload, bigger payloads, more efficient use of burn, and more importantly, the ability to actually reuse their materials in terms of the rockets and components.
Sure, Yansong, we are seeing another development in space, and there are some who say that this is a bit of an ominous development. The United States military says China is developing space capabilities at, quote, twice the rate of the United States. In fact, one U.S. official warned that China would overtake the United States by 2030 if the U.S. didn't accelerate its program. Are we seeing a race to militarize space?
Well, I think there's a race in space in all aspects. In particular, we have witnessed the NASA administrator using the Chinese Mars mission photo to demonstrate to the Congress in sake of getting more budget for their space program. I think this is there's always an exaggeration of the Chinese military side of the program. We are, as you have seen, that the number of launches into exploration missions are increasing. In particular, lunar and Mars missions. Those are for peaceful purpose. And in fact, most recently, we had a successful telecommunication and TT&C demonstration with the European Space Agency on the Mars mission. So that was a successful international collaboration. And the Chinese manned mission is also open for international cooperation. For example, the ESA astronauts has been training in China, even learning Chinese so that they can board on the Chinese spaceship in the future and to cooperate and collaborate well on science missions. So number of science technologies and civil applications and commercial sectors has been very active in the past year in space activities in China. And the military side, the national security side, also we have the implementation of certain projects, and that is not as the speed the U.S. has exaggerated into the size and the scale. So I think overall the Chinese program is more for a peaceful purpose. And I also want to mention that the number of activities in the U.S., in particular SpaceX for launching mega constellation, has some consequences in space debris areas. Right. Recently, we had a note verbal to the permanent mission in Vienna, mentioning that the constellation is causing two aversions with the possible collision avoidance with the Chinese space station. So that is a real threat if you have a very open commercial activities without considering the limitation of space debris in space activities. So that I always want to mention the negative side. Thank you.
Right, John, Zarrella, very quickly, your view on, what can you tell us about the militarization of space?
Well, I mean, I think that the United States has been, come out and been concerned with exactly what you were talking about with hypersonic weapons. And that was one of their very, very big concerns. And that's where they were talking about, I think in particular, the advancement of China with these very sophisticated weapons that, fly so quickly that they can evade just about anything. And that's what raised the red flag, so to speak. They were very concerned about that. But, and when you talk about the space junk part of it, the United States was also critical at Russia for destroying one of its a satellite and spewing space debris out there everywhere. So there definitely has to be some real come to Jesus about what's going on out there with space debris, and because whether it's the Chinese space station, whether it's the U.S. space station, you know, something bad could happen if something isn't done to curtail all of this junk that's out there.
Although at the time, John, the Russians said that they weren't concerned by that particular danger. Keith Cowing, there are rival missions right now to Mars. China and the United States have landed on Mars. In fact, China is already talking of sending its first crewed mission to the planet by 2033. What is the significance of this race right now?
Well, I'd like to add something on the militarization of space. Yep. This isn't new. My father was nearly killed by a V-2 rocket in 1945 when it hit London, and it came down from space. So what we see is a difference in pace and focus. But one of the other things that is being brought into this discussion is protecting what we have in space. So what we have in space now, we've built up, we're talking about space junk as an issue and missions to other worlds. We have such an immense, our world, infrastructure in space now that we're feeling that we have to protect it. So that should be an indication of just how important space is. But in terms of, you know, the grander thing beyond Earth orbit, going to other worlds, you know, we went to the moon half a century ago here in America, and we're going back. And a lot of people say, well, why do we want to do that? Well, you know, there's several generations of people alive today that weren't alive when it happened. And as far as going to other worlds, this has been something that is not just an American dream or a Russian dream. It's kind of a global human dream to go to these other worlds. And it's, I think, as an American, I'd like to think we're going to be on the first mission. But I also, as a human, think that when more and more countries and companies are starting to see the exploration of other worlds as something that is not only doable, but in some cases with these companies like SpaceX, they don't need government money to do some of this stuff. I think I'm personally excited. And the more companies I hear, the more countries I hear that want to do more things, I think the better we all are.
And what do you make of the timeline that China has been talking about, Keith? 2033, that's what, 12 years away? Well,
that was the, you know, it depends which, PowerPoint presentation you read from whom and when. The U.S. was talking about sending Mars missions with humans in that time frame. China's had a very robust space effort. They seem to be picking one of everything, and they're learning their lessons along the way. They do it in a very sequential fashion. And I would not be surprised if they attempt to do that. It may be that we'll be waving hello to them as they land or vice versa, but I don't think it's unreasonable.
Ray Wang, talking about technology, China is now looking at developing nuclear power as its energy source for its missions to the moon and also to Mars as well. And in fact, Russia says it will launch a spacecraft with a nuclear reactor before 2030. The European Space Agency, another one, and the United States also have plans. What does this energy source bring to this space exploration?
Oh, nuclear is definitely an important aspect of getting to space. And one of the reasons that we want to think about that is because of, well, I mean, if you think about these fission systems that are there, it's actually a dependable system to get up into space. And of course, it gives a longevity that's not typical from our current model of space in terms of combustibles. This really gives us the ability to actually go out and, you know, keep these nuclear reactors out there for a long time. Now, we started this. I mean, in 1965, I believe there was a SNAP 10A that was out there that actually operated for 43 days out there. And as of late, I think people are thinking about, hey, if we got to get to Mars and come back, if we had to go across, do a journey to other planets, you know, do we have a dependable power system to sustain life, sustain oxygen production, sustain water filtration, and it all comes back to a combination of solar and nuclear to get there. So I think we're going to see some advantages there. We're also going to see some advantages of how that creates sustainability on Earth as well. But we're going to see a lot of opportunities for you know, nuclear in space as people look at it, you know, and really look at how you can actually use this for thermoelectric conversion and really do that to get to you know, nuclear generation and making that much more possible than before. So I think those are going to be some amazing opportunities as well. So,
John Zarrella, you know, we've been talking about rivalry in space, the competition in space, etc. But there is room for cooperation, isn't there? Because Russia reportedly, as you pointed out, expects NASA to take its cosmonauts to the International Space Station, and that could happen perhaps as early as next year. And China has been talking about more international cooperation in space as well. So this has become known as space diplomacy. What's the potential for that?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that that the United States and China certainly will remain far apart for the foreseeable future. I don't think politically that's going to change. But everybody has their partnerships that are lined up. And as was pointed out, China is got, European Space Agency astronauts training there. The United States has European astronauts training with them, as well as Canadians and others. But, if you talk about cooperation, just look ahead. We're coming up maybe the day before Christmas on the 24th, when the James Webb Telescope is supposed to launch into space. $9 billion. That's the U.S. portion alone, not counting China and not counting Canada and the European Space Agency. So this is a huge cooperative project to put, the most sophisticated telescope, more sophisticated than Hubble, out into space at about 1 million miles out, and look back to the beginning of time, basically, some 15 billion years ago, if it's successful. So, cooperation is going to continue around the board with different nations who are partnering with each other, and, different companies are going to continue their own thing. So certainly partnership is critical and key, particularly if you're planning on going to Mars. No one nation could ever afford a trip to Mars alone with humans. It would be way too costly. So you will see partnerships develop when the timing is right, and when it really looks like we're about to head to Mars. Those partnerships will develop. Perhaps down the road, when the timing is right and it's ripe, perhaps the U.S. and China will be able to get together.
Sure, Yansong, very quickly, I've got less than a minute. I want to talk about one other significant development which we saw. China also saw the first woman walk in space, Wang. She was part of that second crew to the to the space station. How significant was that?
Well, she made a maiden voyage in outer space as well. The EVA was conducted successfully, and she was very happy and conducting a teaching lecturing. The last time she did that was also on the last mission in 2013, and that was also received by more than 60 million students in China. So this time is even more popular. So that was very significant to the Chinese space program.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.